So August 5th, 1986. I know that I don't even have to say anymore, but that day has quite a bit of significance to you, John. What happened on that day?
It was August the 5th, 1986 at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I can still stand within a foot, close to a gate, entrance gate, as to where I stood and talking to a fellow by the name of Brian Marsh. Brian Marsh was a grade inspector, an inspector for the grading organization that we use, the Council of Forest Industry, Northern Sector, and did the grading and quality control inside our plant of the lumber graders that we employ to make sure that if we stamp our products with a grade stamp that tells the strength of the pieces that we manufacture, a grade stamp goes on it, put on by us, and then inspected, not the individual, but they do inspections to make sure we maintain the quality standards, which is obviously very important. And so I knew him well because I also was involved in the Council of Forest Industry, actually on their board, and in the Northern Sector, and I was a deputy chair of the Quality Control Committee of the Northern Sector of Kofi, and so I knew the fellow well, and and I had been complaining about the quality of the incoming raw material that we had, which was the lumber is the highest grade, which they use for structural building, like this house uses the high quality grade.
Yeah.
Then below that is another grade that is not for structural use, usually for making grading or something that does not have a bearing of other weights, and so you cannot use it in formal structures. And then the lowest quality is what they call economy dimension. That is the lowest grade. That is not suitable for anything then other than for bracing, concrete forms, and all of those kind of things. Usually means that it has defects on it.
Right.
And so that puts it in the lower grade. And so we were buying that particular quality for remanufacturing, cutting out the defects, and then bringing up the grade, making different products that we manufactured from it, and also the shorter pieces that we then introduced here, finger jointing, where we take the shorter pieces, we glue them together into a solid 8-foot piece that becomes what they call a stud. A stud is the vertical use in the walls. Most of the walls have studs. That's the product we manufactured out of the solid lumber, and the little pieces we glued together again, and they also then became studs. That once we glue them together, and the joint is certified, then it is just like a solid piece.
Okay. So you said that you noticed that the lumber you were getting, something was iffy with it, right?
Correct. The lumber, obviously we have spectrums of the different qualities, of the highest quality. If it doesn't make it because of defects, it goes to the lower one. If it doesn't make it there, it goes to the next one down. But if you looked at the spectrum of those, there is ones that just not quite made it and are just below it. But that part was missing. Like it was only the low grade of the low grades were there. Where is the top? So I had been complaining to my lumber grade, and I said, where is the top? What is happening? So a couple of things could happen, that the mill sorted the different qualities for different customers, which is really not what we bought. We bought the entire spectrum. And so, so I had been complaining to him, and then again, as I was complaining to him and saying, well, where is the top? How could this possibly be? And then he said to me, I have to tell you something, John. And I had a real problem here last week. I was in Texas. A shipment of lumber went to a customer that was also a lumber remanufacturer that had the same issue, that he complained that the top was not there. That's in Texas, where a lot of our wood is, or to the United States, where a lot of wood is going. In this case, it went to what I call a sophisticated buyer that knows lumber grades and also complained, where is the top?
Okay.
He had to then go down as to inspect, because there was a complaint or what they call a claim. If a customer has a claim, then they may choose to have the grading agency send somebody down
Okay.
to check the quality.
So Brian went down.
Brian went down. And then, as he was inspecting, because the buyer had knowledge about that, like I do, in saying, where is the top? You know, and Brian would say, this lumber was graded not by the normal grading rules, but by a second grading rule.
Okay.
And so what had happened, there were in effect not one standard set of grading rules that were the public ones,
Right.
but there was another one, grading rule, far less restrictive and confidential, not known by the buyers.
So Brian told you that in person that morning.
He told that to the customer in Texas,
Oh.
who then said, I need to have that confirmed that this is allowed by the American lumber standards,
Yeah.
which is the higher, again, the ones that check the grading agencies again. And there is the same organization in the United States that does that. And they came in and they confirmed that that had happened and was questionable. So what Brian told me that morning, this is what happened. So there are, in effect, two sets of grading rules. The one that the public knows about it, the other one is more confidential and far less restrictive. When I heard that, it was to me inconceivable that that could have happened. You know, I'm from the generation where I say the policeman is honest.
Yes.
That's where I come from. So then when an inspector, a formal inspector, does an inspection of the rules, then I assume they are using the public rules that we all know.
Of course, of course.
Not saying that in my back pocket I have another set of rules that are secret, you can't see it,
Yeah.
and that reduces the quality substantially.
So what did Brian tell you that morning to do? Did he say that something had to be done?
He said to me that he just came back from Texas, and it must have been a horrible trip for him because that customer put a lot of pressure on him, and that it was creating a real problem, and somebody should do something about it. So when I heard that, all of a sudden, I had no idea, and I could not conceive that something like that could be happening. So a chill went over my back and saying, how could that possibly be? Now, me also being the co-chair of the Quality Control Committee, I said, well, I'll do something about it. So I straight went to my office, jumped in my truck, drove to the office of the Northern Interior Lumber Sector Grading of COFI, and talked to the Chief Quality Control, a fellow by the name of Niels Larson, and and walked into his office and said to Niels, I have to talk, as a member of the board, and the co-chair of the grading rule or the grading subcommittee, I need to talk to you about the NGR guidelines, the National Grading Rule Guidelines. And he said to me, John, close the door. We got to talk. And then he spilled the beans to me. There is in effect a set of rules that are not authorized, that are being used, and that is far less restrictive than the official grading rules.
Can you kind of explain what the restrictive official grading rules were?
The national grading rules for dimension lumber are North American rules that are adapted throughout all of North America that apply to lumber in the different areas, but they all follow the same principles, and they are all public, agreed upon by everybody, are accepted by architects, engineers, builders, bankers, and consumers, that once you build your house, like the house that we are sitting in, then you must know and you must have comfort that obviously the inspectors, the architects, the city inspectors, that they know the lumber that is used in the house, may it be structural or may it be vertical, is used to a certain strength criteria. And affected, although I was buying the low grades,
Yeah.
With the low grades, the higher grade, they also had dropped the bottom out and put it into the next grade.
Okay.
And the next grade, they dropped the bottom out and put it in the others.
Right.
And so, so that the quality, the quality of the low grade, in my particular case, so they had, this was the spectrum of the low grade. They would take the top of the low grade, put it in the next upper grade,
Right.
and then took the wood from the upper grade or the mid grade, they put it in the next one up.
So what they were giving you was just barely.
My grade, the top had gone into the next grade. The top from the next grade had gone into the structural grade, and so not good.
No.
And not good in terms of from a quality perspective. Not good in terms of from a builders and engineering perspective. And
Potentially dangerous.
so it was dangerous, in fact. And so in my discussion with Niels Larsen, he said it is out of hand. It has got to the point that people are going further and further, and that thing is going to blow up. Somebody needs to do something about it. So I said to him, what should I do? He said, there was another, and I don't want to be over technical, but there was an annual meeting of the national grading rules in Canada, and that was in September, and this was in August.
Okay.
He said, write a letter to them, and here is the address, this is the people that you should address it to, and raise the issue as something that you're really concerned about, so we get it on the agenda, or at least we start talking about it. That's what I did.
Okay. And then what happened after that?
What happened after that, again, I then also complained to my supplier. In particular, this one in particular was Northwood Pulp and Timber. That was one of my main suppliers.
Yeah.
And virtually instantly, we were cut off of all supply of lumber to our operations.
So that must have affected operations for you.
Oh yeah, very much so. And and then it got to the point that obviously now I had raised the issue. It was now out in the open, and and then they had broken their contract and cut us off of raw material. So I thought, even then still, Veronica, I thought that the problem was just local here.
What did you discover?
But I discovered it was not only local or regional or provincial or just Canada. It was a practice that had been going on for virtually 20 years, from Florida to California, from Labrador to Alaska. It was a practice that I believe is a multi-billion-dollar fraud, actually, and that's how it was written up in a lot of the documents. So I then filed, at that point, when I filed the action, or, against Northwood Pulp and Timber and some other people that are in my book, and then started the litigation. I had never been in a court. I had never even sat in a courtroom. And so I had to find a lawyer. I obviously didn't have a lot of resources, and then a lot of the work, the background work, I did myself. And we filed the lawsuit. By then, I was nobody was supplying me with any more lumber, and virtually the plant was down, and so I was scraping all my resources that I possibly could access, and started the litigation, and went to the courts. And what that all involves, at some point, I want to write about it a bit, about the court system, as to a lot of people, respectfully, including me, do not understand some of the things that go on, not in a bad way, but in terms of understanding how the process really works.
Of course, yeah.
So that it was a civil litigation. That means that A lot of information had to be brought together. There were discoveries. I believe I had something like 24 discovery documents where usually a whole day long you sit in discoveries and then are put under oath and then have to be discovered under oath and on the record. That can be used later on in the court case.
Okay.
In our case, because there were several parties involved, there were several discoveries we had with different lawyers. And when the court case started here in Prince George, it was scheduled for 30 days.
Right.
It ran over, it then was moved to Vancouver for virtually another 30 days in front of Justice Martin Taylor, and who later became a judge on the Supreme Court. It was a whole new experience for me. And then during that process, there were at least 4 or 5 lawyers involved, and then probably another 10 that were interveners that may have had an interest in the outcome of that case as it would affect them potentially in their jurisdiction, especially in the States. So then gradually I found out how much wider and deeper and further this all went.
Exactly, yeah.
And that process was extremely difficult and very trying, so.
Well, you mentioned to me that you were cross-examined, you said, for a week straight?
For a week, yeah, 7 days.
What was that experience like?
The whole idea about cross-examination is that, in my case, some of the best lawyers in the province will cross-examine you, in a very effective way to prove your credibility or the lack thereof. So what they may say, for instance, it was on July the 6th, 1985 or 86, and that day you said this and this happened, and it was sunny out that day. Yes, it was sunny out. Okay, can you go to your document number 6? Yes. And then this is all under oath, and go to page number this and line that. Here it says that you were asked that during discoveries 4 months ago, and you said it was raining. Are you lying now, or were you lying then? So it's a very intimidating process.
Of course, an entire week of that,
Yeah, and these people are good. The advantage that I had, I didn't have to lie, for one, and I was not going to be intimidated, so. Which is a challenge in its own, because even now I still know those lawyers in a way, and they are some of the best ones in the province.
So while all this was happening in court, what was happening to your business just at the same time?
Not much left of it. I was just barely hanging on by my fingernails, so we were being boycotted by a number of suppliers we had before. In fact, we were making chips. And the chips that we had, although there are 4 pulp mills right by, actually 3, 2 Intercontinental and Prince George Pulp, but also Northwood was about a double-sized one. So there were at least 3.5 pulp mills here in close range by our operation. We probably the closest one to the pulp mill, but nobody would take our chips. So I couldn't put them in the dump here. So I hauled them all the way to Mackenzie free of charge, just to have some place to put them, because otherwise it would put me down. Yeah. And then so that's the process that went on. It took everything that I had, and it was hard on the family, obviously. And
I was actually going to ask about your personal life at this time. What was going on there?
Well, it was very hard on me. Obviously I had separated from my wife, and I had my then girlfriend that was not staying with me, but I knew all along, and eventually became my wife. And during that period in particular, it was very trying on my kids, and and here on the mill, and on my employees.
And then you spoke in the book that you got some threats during this time as well. Go into a little bit of that.
So the other thing that happened, in the 6 months period during all of that, I had 5 arsons in about 6 month period that involved 2 pieces of equipment in the bush that were torched, and then I had a small sawmill in the Bowron region, which was torched. This was not, I think it had happened. We had investigations in it, and there's photographs of exactly to see what happened and how it was done. And then at the same time, you know, my dry kilns here in town, where we still were trying to operate as best we could. Somebody tried to burn down our dry kilns, and we just got it just in time. And then an attempt was made on my house, you know, so yeah. Where my house at in the older part of the town here in Prince George, in the Miller Edition, somebody did similar things as they did to the dry kilns. They took a 2x2, you know, stick, and they had a cloth at the end and had it dipped in coal oil, and then stuck it underneath the back of my house. And fortunately, the neighbor saw it, or somebody saw it, and the police or the fire department got there in time, and you know, but it was stressful.
Of course, I couldn't imagine at all, like, going through something like that. It would definitely take a toll on your mental health. I want to ask, you know, you're the only person who stood up, you know, for what you believed was right at that time. How did it feel being alone, just completely alone, and none of your other buddies from that you knew were also standing behind you?
Yeah, good question, Veronica, because what I thought, naive me likely, is that when I found out about the grading rules, the secret grading rules, I thought my peers in the industry would be as outraged about it or as upset about it as I was. That we should not be doing that, because at some point, especially what Niels Larsen, the chief inspector, said, this thing is going to blow up. At some point, things are going to go wrong, and this whole thing is going to blow up. And you know, but they didn't. You know, so you know, and really, you know, surprised me in a big way. So I was alone. In fact, W5 did a segment on it and showed me actually walking on 3rd Avenue and saying everybody's scared to approach John Brink because the industry is boycotting them, and if they do, the industry then was unforgiving in terms of you would never work in the industry again if you were siding with John Brink. The newspaper here, then the Prince George Citizen, virtually didn't write at all on it. W5 questioned them as to why. It was a major case. And so that was a real surprise. And then even when I won the lawsuit, there was not much exposure to it. And then for me, then saying, well, I never talked about it all that much. We won the case. Yeah. As a result of that, it changed the grading rules in North America, from Florida to California, Labrador to Alaska. And then, then although I had nothing left, absolutely, totally nothing, then, the fellow that is the head of the, Tom Searles, head of the American Lumber Standards organization in Washington, D.C., I knew him, and he had been there for something like 20, 30 years and finally retired after 35 years. He knew how dangerous this was and what potentially, a lot of people said, he just wants to make money on the lawsuit. If I wanted to do that, I would have litigated it in the States. That, in fact, I didn't want nothing from the lawsuit other than I had no idea of the magnitude of it, how big it really was. And that was in a way a problem. There was too much money involved, and they had to stop me from proceeding with the lawsuit, or at least then they made an offer on the steps of the court case, and I said no, unless everything is changed, all brought into the open. I'm not interested in anything, yeah.
Can I? You had asked for $5 million, I think it was, in damages. What was it that you finally received after winning the court case?
Nothing really, So and by the time we got the ruling of the judge, or the findings of the judge found for me, or for the company. And then the next phase is now you have to prove the damages. By then, if you do prove the damages in a case like that, that may cost you $500,000 on experts. I didn't have that. I had to do it on my own, and I did it on my own. And so the damages that we got awarded for that particular portion, and that on the basis of the wood that we received, not of the rest of the case, is that was I think $250,000. All of that went to the lawyers.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And but that to me was not important. It was not about that. And then since that time, now 30 years ago, right? It was 1990, 1991. I never wanted to talk about it a lot because I felt that it was still too emotional for me.
Right.
Where now, 30 years later, I can look at it more objectively. And I felt that's why it is important to include it in my book and write about it. What was at play? What was at play is that the industry, the most precious thing any company has that produces products, is the credibility of their product, the brand. If they destroy their brand, there really is no more industry and no more company.
Exactly.
That was the issue that was at play. And then saying, where was the government then, either provincial or federal, that have people, Canadian Lumber Standard, how about Canadian Standards Association, how about ALS, how about they all knew about it. Everybody knew about it, but nobody did anything about it. Why? Because there was so much money at play that if you as an inspector in the field said something about it, you would never work again. In fact, we had one individual that was an inspected Canadian Lumber Standards inspection that would again inspect the Council of Forest Industry that we're inspecting. So all the layers were there, and I had him by pure coincidence. I had a little recording machine on my desk then that we used to have then for dictating letters or all those kind of things. So he came into my office and sat down in my office and then started talking about these grading rules, the secret grading rules. And he said, when he started talking, I couldn't resist. I pushed the button and what he said, this was wrong. The guidelines are pushing the grading rule, and they were pushing the guidelines. So the quality here, one there, and they were pushing it. And he said, it's not right, but it made so much money that they couldn't not do it.
So he admitted.
And they all did it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we couldn't get him into court to testify, so, but we had him on the record. And then, in that process, it obviously was immensely hard on myself, my family, the employees of the company, and anyway. So the other things that were part of it, obviously, was the fires in particular, very intimidating. And then my kids couldn't come over anymore from, So so it became very, very hard on the family. The other thing, I started drinking, so.
This was a very difficult time in your life. How did you begin to cope with that on your own time?
It was, a gradual process, so obviously we were successful in the legal action and, I had to kind of rebuild, right? So personally and, so for them, and I'm not saying that all those people around me that were litigating against me were bad people and they were running around and trying to burn my house down. No, what happens around the dynamics of a major court case like this, the stakes are so high for them that they had to find a way of discrediting me in any way they could. And then there are a lot of people that are not directly part of it become, for whatever reason, usually has to do with becoming, friendly with the people that have an ability to, that they can benefit from being perceived to be helpful become involved in some way or fashion, and so that happened to it. There was an attempt made. They charged me with fraud, that are totally unsubstantiated, but I got my name in the paper. But
they charged you with fraud for
for a mortgage of some sort or another, and in any event, then the case got stayed in court or thrown out of court. There was no case, but it was again, that. And it goes back again, Veronica, to the principle of that. I'm from the generation and from the place that I believe the police is honest. How could somebody, all the information that in regards to the allegations of fraud were available, but for some reason or other they proceeded, they got it into the paper, but then it was thrown out. But anything was tried to either discredit me or kind of break me down, and so the court case ended. It was found in our favor. From there and then another virtually year before the damages.
Right. And
but in the meantime, it was extremely difficult. But during the most difficult part, I was drinking more than was good for me. That's for sure, and not eating well, and being close to the point of saying that maybe I have to go to AA or something like that, but then, the funny part about it actually, then, my girlfriend, kind of read me the riot act, and she kind of said, I don't want to see you anymore, so that, the drink, and then, so I was drinking scotch and water was not good for me. No. Then I was still smoking. I had a little pipe. That was not good for me. And then because of all the stress and I can handle a lot of stress, but I was on the prescribed Xanax.
Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable. My chest, something was like this.
Really?
Yeah. But the Xanax helped me, but I became addicted to it.
Oh my gosh.
So I quit all of that. My girlfriend dumped me, so,
Well, she gave you a bit of an ultimatum, you said,
well,
right?
not much, actually. She said, I don't want to see you anymore.
Oh, that was it?
Anyway, so in a week, I stopped my drinks. I never drank again. Well, seldom that I have maybe a sip, but not for any other reason that I don't drink. Mm-hmm. And then I was never worried about it. Would I become a alcoholic? Because no, this was something that I didn't do. And then the smoking I quit all in the same week, and then the Xanax I quit in the same week too. The hardest thing for me to quit, Xanax.
Really?
No question about that.
Well, they say it's highly addictive.
Yeah.
So how did quitting all those things in 1 week? I'm sure was probably very difficult.
I was motivated.
Yeah, you were motivated.
Yeah. So, but in doing the same period, when everything that the pressure of the fires, and that was always on my mind, mm-hmm. and so. I would sit in the middle of the night watching my operations at the mill, and it's very, very intimidating. And then one day when it was virtually, I knew they wanted to break me down. And then one time, I was living on the second story of my house. Mm-hmm. I must have passed out, or something must have happened to me, and I came all the way down the steps, and there was nobody there, and just myself. For all night, and so fortunately I didn't break anything. But mm-hmm. so if that's what they were trying to do, then they nearly did it, but not quite. So yeah.
Well, you look at that. Chapter 5 is quite the roller coaster. It really is, and I'm excited for other people to get the opportunity to read this and really get a grasp of what you went through.
Right.
Chapter 6 is kind of about your rebirth, I almost want to say, coming back after, being hit really hard. But I am looking forward to talking to you about that. But I think we should leave it off here for chapter 5, unless you have anything else that you'd like to add.
The one thing I should ask, Veronica, at the end, when we finally finished the court case, mm-hmm. I talked to Tom Searles, the highest authority of all of that from the United States and the grading rules. He was the senior authority.
Mm-hmm.
He called me and he said, "What can I do
Right.
for you?" And I said, "One thing, your next annual meeting, let me be a speaker." And he said, "That's good." And it was the following month and in the following 2 months. But I had to scramble up all the money because I had no money even to get to Seattle. The night that I got there for the following day, and there were probably about 25 different grading agencies in the United States there under by this meeting by American Lumber Standards.
Mm-hmm.
And so that evening I was in this cheap hotel. In the morning when I got up, I found a newspaper, the Seattle Times.
Yeah.
I still have it. On the front page it said, "Hundreds of homes have been stopped construction because there is inferior lumber in the structures."
Uh-oh.
Case in point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Then when I went to the meeting the following, I didn't mention it to them.
Mm-hmm.
I should have maybe. And when I was in the meeting, I had the opportunity to speak to them. Even then, quite a number of them sat around the table, these heads of different grading agencies that were sitting around the table snickering and still contempt in regards to what I did. But I did what I had to do.
Of course. And
I still would do it today.
You wouldn't take it back. Not change a thing. That's great. That's awesome. Thank you so much again for sharing that with us, John.
Yeah.
And now I look forward to interviewing you for chapter 6.
Thank you.